Horan. She is studying photography at SCAD, and she's got a great, interesting presentation for us today.
So, thank you all for coming. It really means a lot to us. Being a photographer, especially getting your MFA, we really don't get a lot of contact with the outside world, especially with other majors. So it was especially important to me just to kind of get some feedback from somebody who isn't used to looking at photographs all day long, who has maybe painting, sculpture, different types of experiences that you can bring to the work, especially because mine isn't, if you can tell, working with traditional photography. So the project I've been working on is called Contact. I've been working on it now for a little over 6 months, and so instead of using a digital or even a film camera, I'm using a handheld wand scanner. So in order to do these, it actually is coming into direct contact with the physical body of the models that I've been working with. So this is just one of the more detailed photos that I wanted to add in there. It is, if you haven't seen it already, on the floor. So this is kind of just a blown up piece. You can actually see each of the individual hairs, the pores, the really nitty-gritty parts of the human skin. And so almost giving you this sense that you're seeing a lot of this detail from a person, getting to know them in a very intimate way. Yet because everything that doesn't come into direct contact with the scanner falls out of focus immediately. So then you still have this sense of anonymity, that you're not really sure who this person is, even though you're getting so much information about them. So this is John, by the way. And recently I've been kind of thinking about them in relation to cave paintings and some of our oldest forms of art that's in existence, and how they were actually created, that they were having direct contact with the mediums in order to show the human form, which is something we've been fascinated with since the dawn of mankind, of just having our representation being shown, saying that I am here, this is who I am, this is my life, and just having almost this immortality that's created because of your representation of self. So this is kind of how I started. I just wanted to work through a progression of how this has been going. I still haven't even passed the 45-hour review yet, which is happening at the end of this quarter, which for photography students, when you're getting your MFA, it's pretty much the go-ahead to start working on your thesis. So we're going to see in a couple weeks how that turns out. So I'm hoping it's going to be okay. That's why I was like, you know what, I'm just going to jump into it, give this presentation, and see if I can get any more helpful feedback in entering this next stage. So how I first started working on these was to document the entire form. It was almost, a lot of these are kind of experimental, but I'm almost just seeing if I could actually do it. You know, that these are actually pieces of about 150 scans each. So then I painstakingly went into Photoshop. It took about 15 hours for each one of them to put back all of these pieces again. It's almost like being Frankenstein in a way, and just recreating these people. So they were looking almost like if you were going to flay a human, what you'd be getting from that. But then I started realizing that they needed something a little bit more. That things are going to get kind of repetitive, and it's very interesting, especially blowing them up to life size. The detail that you can get and the fascination with the actual low technology and the medium being used, but I wanted to go a little bit further than just the technological aspect of it and having a concept working in it as well. This is a picture that was interesting. Performance is a huge part of this process. So I don't want it to be a work that's only viewed as a performance piece, but just having that build up on the work in itself. And so this was actually an image one of my models had asked if he could take a picture of me scanning him, and he could send it to his wife. And so I thought that that was really, she was in a board meeting at the time. So I thought that it was a really interesting thing, that I felt so voyeuristic that when I'm scanning these people, that they are in such a vulnerable position, yet at the same time, when the camera was turned on me, it kind of made me see it a little bit differently. So it's definitely an interesting experience, to say the least. A lot of times I do them in private dark rooms in the photography building. So it's kind of, you know, this odd experience. You're standing in the dark with somebody. It has to be a darkened room, or else it kind of looks like you're standing in a cloud instead of getting the pure black background of the way that I want. And a lot of times it's a smaller space, and so this person is right next to you, having them get undressed in front of you, and then coming into direct contact with their body, with simple tool in between the two of you. So this is when I first started working on pieces, just experimenting with different poses. And so I had immediately seen her hair, and I was like, that's it, I need to really accentuate this part of your body. And so then this is where I kind of decided that I was just going to take one individual at a time and looking at their own physical characteristics, whether physical characteristics or their interests in general, whether it be yoga or running or whatever it may be. She's a belly dance instructor, but I thought that this one she needed to have some hair going back. This was John, and so I just wanted to show you a lot of people had started saying that it was referencing almost like the Shroud of Horan and giving it this religious aspect. And that's when I started to think about adding in symbology into the works themselves. And so when I had done a full-size cyanotype, which is hanging in my bathroom, sorry for the really poor quality, I pulled off of Facebook, but just to give you what other people were seeing when they were like, this really is referencing something that's a lot older and symbolic in a lot of ways. And that's when I started almost thinking about them as modern-day cave paintings in a sense, or even hieroglyphs in some senses. From there, then I started working with a couple different couples and seeing if it was the interaction between them that could then be added into the process, which I still think can be, I still implement that in a lot of the works. I have a couple that's coming in tomorrow morning, so I'm still kind of like playing around with what's going to be going on, how the setup is going to be going for that. But again, these are printed almost full size. This is the first time that I had used the actual pulling in of outside elements, of using physical symbols that in the actual images themselves. So in this, it's the peacock feathers that and the pose, but I want them to be pretty open. I don't want them to be directed towards one specific religion or idea, but pretty much just to have them being symbols and concepts that are generalized so that most people can access them in their own sort of way, bringing in your own background and your own knowledge into them. This is another up-close view of her. Yeah. So this is the full size, and this is just an idea of the detail that you can see in her face. So then you can see them when you get up close to the prints. And so these are test prints. So eventually I do plan to print some of them larger. And possibly even, I'm still toying around with the idea, but then having a show that they would be mounted onto the walls. In John's case, I think I'm going to keep him on the floor, but almost having a darkened space and just having lights on the individuals themselves and having you as the audience interacting with them on a personal level, almost instead of interacting and having the emphasis being with the people around you. Because that is an idea that I've been working with, that in this age when a lot of our communication is based upon technology, that the importance of physical contact and actually having intimate relationships face-to-face, having coffee with somebody, walking with somebody, instead of just saying, 50 hellos a day on Facebook, really the connections that are being lost and the importance in that we're not seeing anymore. We're just living in such a fast-paced society that we put much more emphasis on having a broad range of friends and interactions instead of a few deep, really, relationships with a lot of meaning in them. This is Anna. I was also playing around with the idea of adding in symbols that mean something personally to the figures that I am working with. And I do see them almost as paintings in a way. I am painting with light. Essentially, there is no other light source that's being used besides the scanner itself. When the wheels are being rolled over the surface of the skin, that's what's causing the light. And so I am almost painting what I'm going to be seeing onto the prints afterwards. But these were elements from her cultural background that she was highly interested in with the colors and the textiles. This is the last that I have to show you. This is Jonathan, the last one that I had put together. So I'm incorporating some more contemporary symbols, just having a contemporary piece of furniture, having these two guys back to back. And I'm still adding symbology has been pretty new. It's been going on for like a month and a half now. So I'm still kind of working on different ideas and seeing where it's leading. But if you guys have any suggestions or feedback, I would love to hear.
Wow, 10 minutes exactly.
I'll tell you something.
Yeah.
I was really engaged by this idea that you are using technology as a medium of contact, but that your experience of the person is incredibly intimate, and you also want the experience of someone viewing your pieces to be incredibly intimate. So I'm wondering if you could kind of bring that more into what you're doing as a whole. I guess more like, is that central to what you're doing? I think it is.
Yeah.
So I, like when you said, you know, I want people to see this in the gallery, I was like, oh, I don't ever want to see it on a screen. It should like never be accessible by screen. You should only have to go and be like this secret gallery. You have to go experience it in person, and it's touch. So that was.
That is something I've been dealing with in putting my website together. It's these little teeny thumbnails, you know, and really you can't get a sense of what they look like at all, you know, the high amount of detail that you're getting in them. So I have been having some struggles with that and deciding how it is going to be presented, but definitely I think that is a good point, and to actually say on my website that the best way to do these is going to be in person, because just seeing it on a screen really doesn't do it justice, and I don't think that having without the face-to-face, the intimate contact, you know, with this person always confronting you, that it doesn't give you the same communication that a screen would from the privacy of your own home.
I understand that the experience that you and the model have together when you're actually doing this process is something really unique. It would be, I mean, I don't know how, I don't have any ideas, but do you have any of how you would capture the experience apart from the image?
I've played around with it before. I've done some videos. I've tried stop-action animation. I've also recorded the conversations. But in a lot of ways, I feel like that's almost infringing on the intimacy that we're having at that particular moment. Even though I don't know this person, we still are strangers in a lot of ways, and many times I'm never going to see this person again. I think that that's something that would be best just having this being the information.
Maybe one thing that you could consider is to do a time build-up of, like, as the image is being built. So you could show us the little sections of scans and show us how they all get stitched together in some way. So it's basically like you could maybe record the process of stitching them together in Photoshop,
Right.
and then play it back.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, my question is also focused on the intimacy piece as well. And what I was curious about was along the same lines as what Anne-Marie was talking about, recreating this experience of being really close to someone that's a stranger, and
Right.
how do you become intimate with that? And I think that she's right too in getting it off of the screen, because a lot of us are really comfortable being really close to screens, and you're used to having this distance from art in museums, and so forcing the viewer to come really close in physical proximity to the work and sort of plan for that, so that they are as close as you were, essentially, when you're going through this process, and having sort of view it incrementally that way. Because I'm projecting this obviously, but I'm assuming that it was a little bit uncomfortable, right? Because you're becoming so intimate with this person, it's a complete stranger, and so there's this tension there, and for us to be as far away from that art that we're not used to being close to as you were to this person as you were taking it, that might be a really interesting way to capture that emotional tension that you experienced when you were.
Right, yeah, almost having like a screen or something that you have to walk up close to these things, you know, you have to.
There has to be something in front of it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Any other questions?
I would actually piggyback on that too, that there was a really great dynamic of scale when you did that super close up, you know, because part of what you are talking about is this intimacy, and so you don't need to know if it's a nose or an arm or a finger, just like that up close detail has its own strength, and it sort of it did this nice context to then the full-size images. I don't know what you do with that, but that was something that particularly struck me, is that scale. And even, you know, showing them small, you kind of, what is kind of nice is you realize how much power it does lose when it gets small like that. So it's almost like doing a small one makes you want these big ones and makes you want that intimacy because this is so unsatisfying. This is really satisfying.
Yeah, definitely. But when I blow them up on the computer screen, I'm still like amazed at the detail that I can see in them. And unfortunately, right now, just being restricted by the 24 inches, I really have to start playing around with getting some larger paper and just seeing, the possibilities of how far I can go.
I think this is incredibly interesting to look at. At first, it was interesting how you mentioned painting. Because at first I thought it might be like really old medieval European painting, looks like the quality of it. And I was wondering if you're doing kind of do a series of like for example with peacock feathers, or because I'm wanting to see more of the images with seeing symbolism in it, and I think it will start to like produce meaning and stuff when there are multiple images.
That's funny, actually. I had a meeting with one of my professors this past week who said the same thing, and to really kind of narrow my language down to about 6 or 7 symbols, just so that I start forming my own language and almost creating narratives between the different pieces. Because once you start going into symbology, I mean, you can pretty much like, sky's the limit, and I really don't want to get that muddled, and have my idea kind of get lost in that. So yeah, I would definitely agree that I'm going to start narrowing it down. So if there was anything that you had seen that particularly struck you, well, the peacock feathers, that's always good to know.
I noticed that when you use the scanner, right, the body scanner,
Mm-hmm.
so when you scan the body, it's not as flat. I'm sure you have to probably, how did you scan the bodies?
It's actually, I do usually, it depends on the pose, but if you just imagine that you're just going to be going on one surface, so you really have to start thinking about it in that way. But for instance, necks and things like that, whenever there is a curve, that it is going to accentuate that. In some of the pictures, I think like, it's a lot further back maybe, but you can see how long and elongated their necks are in that one particular pose. That anything that's going to be there, it's flattening out 3-dimensional shapes into something that's 2-dimensional. So as long as you keep that in mind, like if I was going to be doing a seated pose, I might have doing the front, but then once the legs are out in front, then you do those. So you do lose some depth, which is something also that I'm kind of struggling with, but you always kind of have to keep that in mind.
Right. But I was kind of thinking that, my point was that I've seen embossed prints. Have you seen embossed prints?
Mm-hmm.
There's an example that we're using in art. So I couldn't help but imagine it bringing on the experience better if it was an embossed print.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Adding almost like another 3-dimensional quality to it.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a question. Did you think of any other tools, like you use scanning? How did you come to that selection?
I mean, I really was working on something else at the time. That I do have, my cat always brings me little creatures home, and so trying to document these things, I was like, well, use a scanner, look at all the intimate details of these little things, and then seeing like what else I could do with this thing. And it was just one night that I just started scanning myself. The one thing that you have around all the time, your best subject, and started looking at those in relation to everything else that I had scanned, the fabric, the walls, and it was just the most fascinating. I was like, wow, look at the detail that you can actually get with this, and so it kind of just took off from there. So, like a lot of happy accidents, it worked out.
Did you find out if there was any other tool, for example, this part?
Nothing that I've really found. I'm going to start actually playing around with the flatbed scanner tomorrow, just to see the difference between the two, maybe adding a little bit more depth and adding it in that way. But nothing really that's going to give you this high amount of detail that you get with using the scanner. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that show you were talking about where you want to put it in a dark room and flash a light on it. Are you trying to do it on both sides? Because is it going to be against the wall, or I think if you bring it in, outside the wall, and take both sides of your subjects, and you can go around the picture. I think that would look nice.
Yeah, that could be. I've been playing around with that idea too, and I'm actually going to be showing that. I guess there are a lot of issues still to worry about, like what's going to be on the other two sides, and kind of just dealing with the form. Because Because right now I'm still fascinated with the two-dimensionality that's being created from these three-dimensional pieces. But perhaps I'm maybe playing around with fabric, different ways of actually displaying them. They might not even stay on paper, you know, like, we're just gonna see. Thank you, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
What I find interesting about this concept of using the scanner, you're talking about how it being contact and so tactile in this experience. But when I look at these prints, what I find so remarkable about them is they're so ethereal. It's almost like in one aspect you're having contact with ghosts, right? Like the images, there's detail and then everything just sort of fades away, like this sort of ghost-like quality. And it's kind of interesting to think about this play between the way the image comes out and the actual process and how you interact between the two.
Right, yeah, when they are displayed, it's almost like they're emerging from this darkness. Which, yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I would like to be able to add that into my concept somehow, maybe talk about it in my artist statement a little bit more. But that's something I'm still even just astounded by and trying to like come to grips with that too. But thank you, yeah, for pointing that out.
This is a final comment. I think it's also interesting in this day of high technology, we go to the airport and we're subjected to a body scanner and people view that as an invasion of privacy. And then this is the opposite side of that, where you have a model who is willing to subject themselves to this completely intimate contact. And I don't know if you could do anything about that or write about that in your paper, but I think it's an interesting reversal of what we're seeing today.
Right, yeah, definitely. It's something that I've put a lot of thought into, and how many times, you know, that our personal space is invaded by different scanners and ways of surveillance, and how you're right. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about this being the opposite, though, of that, so that's a really good point. Thank you.
I just have one question. You have this really good thing about intimacy and contact, and you see the intimacy in the new models, you get intimacy and contact between your models. Have you considered poses that try and engage, because you get a lot of detail, intimacy from your viewer, not just in the emotional connection, but literally the kind of idea where you have a gentleman sitting, somebody else is just a partial of their hand, almost as if the viewer himself is, you know, it's your hand that's reaching out to touch, or one of the models reaching their hand out in the palm, and getting the detail of that, and which, like, they're reaching out to intimately contact you. Have you tried to play with those sort of physical aspects at all?
No, I haven't, but because I usually just keep them to the size that they are. I keep them in relation to everything. But then once you add in the concept of foreshortening and having that idea, having this large hand almost reaching out to you, that's another, yeah, that's a fascinating idea to actually have to play on that. That's why I'm here for suggestions like that. Thank you.
Thank y'all for your suggestions, and thank you, Sarah, for